Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. I'm gonna check the sound here. Yep. Okay. This we're over that hurdle. Okay, YouTube is already giving me a warning that my stream rate is less than its recommended secret number for not buffering. So we might have a similar issue to what we've had in the past, but that's okay. Like I said before, we're uh, we're in the middle of row corn and beans. It's just part of being out in the country. But let's get into it. How was your week of growing? If you had a tough week of growing in your geographic location, drop in the chat. I want to mention it because this week in particular for Minnesota, and I have I have some stories, but the growing this week was pretty tough. So today's a beautiful day. I think it's supposed to be low 70s for high. That's what we should have had the last couple few weeks, but that's not what Minnesota Mother Nature had in mind for us. So we kind of inverted the season partially, and this last week was extremely brutal, uh, mostly because the timing of a lot of plants, and I want to talk about that. Part of the being out in the country. Yes, I love that pun. uh, so this past week, brutal growing conditions mostly because of the timing of the plants. So we're in mid-June now, or just about. Naturally, the temperatures are gonna warm both the overnight lows and then the daytime highs. That's what we anticipate. However, when we're growing those spring plants that we enjoy, that really like cooler weather, when we get that sudden temperature spike, it can cause a lot of problems. Now, for the way I grow, I'm exclusively in containers except for the stuff that I grow for our family, and I'm in containers because that has to deal with my business. So, of course, if you've heard me before, you know about that my business with grow bags or container gardening. So the rules that typically apply to gardening in the ground or even raised beds don't necessarily apply to containers. What that means is I have to spend a lot more time thinking about how I can manipulate my growing environment to lessen the stress of the environment on my plants. So when I show you some plants here in a little bit, you're going to see the difference between uh, plants that I left where they were growing since I guess that'd be the beginning mid-April, and then plants that I moved to a different part of the property to give them a break, as much of a break as I could give them. So sadly, a lot of my sugar snap peas, they're done. I do have one round left, but this time of the year, I just expect that they're going to be winding up. Some of the sugar snap peas that I was trying to pull out of their current location to give them a break, I actually put them in a shady spot, and they only got maybe sun till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, noon, and then they were in the shade for the rest of the day. But sadly, a lot of those, since they had already were producing pods, and I was trying to prolong the life of those the visual aesthetics of it, because these plants aren't typically meant for consumption. Although when I run in my sessions in the senior living communities, uh, uh, participants can eat sugar snap peas or whatnot, but I was trying to prolong the viability of those plants. And so normally if you were growing sugar snap peas, you would just harvest them when they're ready and then throw them in the fridge or consume them immediately. And the way I'm growing is uh, quite a bit different from that. I'm trying to get the plant to the wow factor and keep it in the wow stage as long as possible. And how I have done that in the past and how I continue to do that or approach that is I run in waves or successions. So I don't plant sugar snap peas, since we're talking about that. I don't plant them all at one time. I plant them in rounds. So I'll do so many this week. so many next week, so many next week, and you kind of understand if you do succession planting with short grow cycle plants like radishes, that's the same type of thing that I use. But there comes a point with cool season plants where it's just the season's over and we're just the natural transition into the summer months. But this year, and I talked about this for months now. I think I started talking about February when I was doing these live streams. Is that the last couple of years we've had some freak 90-degree temperature days in the end of May into June, and this year was kind of on the trend. So I think this is the third year in a row now. And what I'm kind of curious, I don't know the answer to this, is does this is this parallel or is this in conjunction with our winters? So for the past 3 years, we've also had really low snowfall compared to normal. And I did mention earlier this year that some of my perennial fruits, like strawberries, this last year and this year, I've had a very successful growth with the strawberries, mainly because I didn't leave them outside. In the past years, I've covered them up in the winter, but I anticipate having that blanket of snow, which is kind of like an insulation blanket. So this past year, I moved all the perennial fruit, which are in grow bag containers, into a shop, and they did just fine. In fact, I've been really impressed with all my June bearing strawberries. They've been pumping out strawberries like crazy. Um, but anyway, before I get too distracted, that's all to say that this last week was brutal. We were in the 90s in much of the Twin Cities. In fact, Thursday I drove up to Champlin, that's a northwest suburb of Minneapolis, and I'm south of the cities by about half an hour. So as I got into the Twin Cities and kept on driving north, the temperature kept on getting hotter. I'm like, what's going on? And when I got out of the van at the location I was going to, it was 94, 95 degrees this past Thursday, which I'd expect that in like July, August, sure. End of June, sure. But I don't know. This last week was just kind of crazy. But I guess since we ripped the Band-Aid off and we're in summer growing, what that means here now is that I'm transitioning. So I'll talk about this a little bit about what that looks like. But pretty much spring temperature, spring growing is over for me. Ironically, this week the forecast highs are going to be low to mid 70s. So go figure. Uh, all right, what do we got here? Jay says my week was good and very busy, getting the last of my garden in. Awesome. It's 90%, 98% done, and I hope to finish after the show. Fantastic. Yeah, using snow and cold temperature for part of effective gardening is part of my reality too. Yep. Yep. It's something you don't always think about, um, but especially the perennial fruit or even perennial trees like this oak tree behind me, they appreciate having that snowpack because when spring comes around, that's where they're getting water from as that snow melts. So I I don't I don't need that snow blanket uh, for the water content, but it is nice to have for an insulating blanket. So, but that's okay. So besides having the 30-degree temperature swings for daytime highs this last week, we got a truck going by. Oh, I was gonna mention too. Last week we had some birds that want to be part of this live stream, and you may hear some new barn kittens because one of the moms just had a litter of kittens. So if you hear some kittens, that's what's going on. But besides the 90s this past week here in Minnesota, I was unpleasantly woken up at 3 a.m. to a severe lightning storm, and thankfully we didn't have hail. We already had hail a little while ago, and that didn't do too much damage to the plant nursery. It banged up some rhubarb, but honestly the leaves were like this small, so The rhubarb has all recovered, so that's good. But uh, that thunderstorm at 3 a.m. woke me up, and it's not the first time this has happened. But I was out of bed and I was watching at the window, watching the radar. I was looking to see if we had any hail coming, because if we did, I need to go out and do some proactive measures. And what that looks like is I have a hoop house with 10 mil scrim plastic on it, and if you ever decide that you want to grow in using a hoop house or a high tunnel, I absolutely recommend 10 mil scrim. So that's 10 mil the thickness of the plastic, but the scrim, that means it has that nylon reinforcement. So if you get up close to it, you'll see like X's. It's reinforcement going through that whole plastic cover. It just reinforces it and makes it that much stronger. And we've had hail on that hoop house more than once, and it's withstood all of it. It's pretty tough. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but that hoop house is also reinforced. So if you're going to be in a windy area, uh, building a hoop house, or if you buy a kit, I built mine from scratch, uh, just raw materials, and I looked at enough blueprints to where I could kind of figure out how everything goes together. But how that hoop house looks now versus when I first started is that first year that I had a hoop house, we had a storm in December, and that was my first year with the hoop house. So I didn't think about the consequences of using the plastic or leaving it on during the winter, and I anticipated pulling snow off of it as we had snow, but I didn't get to that point because we had a nasty windstorm with 80-mile-an-hour straight line winds, and that hoop house was not going to withstand that. It looked like a giant actually stepped on the frame of that hoop house, and it distorted all the hoops. And I had 3/4 inch hoops in there, so they're pretty beefy, but just the force of that was able to distort the hoops in there. So that was a loss. I ended up pulling all the hoops out, and what I did was I sunk a 4x4 skeleton down the center of that hoop house. So if you're inside of it, I'll take a video sometime and show you. But it's a 4x4 skeleton that the hoops are now attached to. The plastic's on top, and then now I put my sun um, uh, fabric over that hoop house last week. So now I got a 30% reduction in the sun's intensity. The shade cloth is what I was trying to say. That's on top of it. Um, so anyway, long story short, I guess it's long enough. But the plastic from that original one, I still have that. It's beat up and it doesn't function as a hoop house plastic, but I use that as an emergency hail tarp. So I have plants that are exposed right now. They're kind of in transition. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention too is if you grow like me, or maybe you don't have time to transplant everything into a traditional garden like in the ground or in a raised bed, or you're doing something like me where you're not planting everything all at one time, you're planting in waves. Uh, at that same time, when you're bringing plants out of the nursery or inside, you have to harden them off, and I've chatted about that briefly in the past. Um, but that's the other brutal thing is that with this 90-degree temperatures last week and the shouldn't say sudden, but the extreme volatility in the daytime highs, because mixed in there when we had some rainy days, the highs were like in the 70s. So even the 20-degree temperature swing for a seedling that's this big that you just brought out of the plant nursery it's catastrophic. So I lost plants last week too. Not a lot. I lost I think 10 seedlings that I had transplanted. They had been outside for a couple weeks already, and they weren't getting full sun for the entirety of the day. But when you have 20 to 30-degree temperature swings within the matter of a week or two, it's very hard for those plants to acclimate. All my plants that were already in the hoop house and they've been out there for months, they did fine. I will show you a couple of the cabbage plants because they got really upset, and I want to show you the difference between um, location. So that's all I did was I moved some certain plants from one spot to another spot, and you'll see the difference when I turn the camera around. I show you guys that. Um, let's see, Jace. Yep, 10 mil scrim plastic, often called string reinforced poly, is heavy duty tear resistant poly film. Yep. Yeah. So what I love about Minnesota is we have days like this. So today is going to be another beautiful day. I think it's mid 70s for highs. It's sunny. There's a few clouds, but it's a nice day out. But we could go from this to 2 days from now, or even tonight, we could have a thunderstorm roll through and dump hail. So, uh, although Minnesota is a beautiful place to live, it has 4 extreme seasons, and you just have to deal with that. So anyway, yeah. So I'm always thinking about ways that I can improve quality of plants, how I can extend seasons, how I can do stuff like I was mentioning, reuse 10 mil scrim tarp as an emergency hail tarp for seedlings that haven't been adjusted to life in Minnesota yet. And then if we do have extreme weather like we did last week, then I'm going to tell you how I deal with that. So talk about this week. So being mid-June, I want to first talk about how I plan my seed, the waves of seedlings. Because I do things quite differently than I think a lot of commercial growers or definitely home growers. And it's just something that I've had years of practice, some trial and error, some learning from others, some just naturally figuring out how far I can push one way. So I think I mentioned a month or two ago, I I plant my tomatoes later than a lot of folks, and that's fine. What I did a couple years ago, I was trying to figure out where that sweet spot was for getting tomatoes to where they had a good set number of true leaves to where they had a fighting chance once they go outside the Minnesota. But then I don't want to start them too late to where I'm gonna suffer on the tail end of the season where I need them to have a good production. So this year the tomato plants they're actually doing really well, and I think I'm gonna stick with that. My starting date for starting the seeds and then transplanting. So the tomatoes I start those mid-March. So they're already, not all of them, but I have uh, quite a few in grow bags already. And then this past week was my first week that is actually distributing cherry tomatoes and a couple slicer tomatoes. Um, so some of the, like the sun golds, I noticed yesterday when I was delivering those to customers, they already have their first flower set on them. So that's all good because them being a more warm season plant, they're going to be more adapted to the temperature swings. Oh, however, I should say, if they're not hardened off correctly, because I did lose some. Ironically, my Tasmanian chocolate slicer tomatoes, I actually lost some of those seedlings. They had been transplanted into their containers, but like I said, the big temperature swings, they looked really upset, and then I actually lost some of those. And then the ironic part of that is that the other slicer tomato that I had transplanted a couple weeks ago at the same time as the Tasmanian chocolates, they did fine, and those were Oregon Spring. So I was scratching my head at that one because I expected the inverse to where the Oregon Spring would suffer, but not the Tasmanian chocolate. But I don't know, different year, different conditions. This is a different year or a different seed provider or vendor that I've gotten the Oregon Spring tomato seeds from too. And those ones, I think I mentioned that they're come from Territorial Seed Company. So right there alone, I'm giving a shout out to them because the Oregon Spring seeds I got from those guys, they're doing really well. So um, yeah. So anyway, transition from spring to summer. Same thing with the sugar snap peas. We're into bean season. So I do multiple waves of beans. I do bush beans. I have done runner beans in the past, and I do like runner beans. They're a little bit harder to move when they get bigger, so I kind of steer away from those just for transportability. So this week I transplanted another round of beans. So I have four bean varieties. I have rock door, amethyst, Tobago is a new one I'm doing this year, and I'm doing that. I actually used AI to figure this one out. I was looking for more heat tolerant bean varieties, and this is something. If you have experience with beans, I'd like to hear your opinion or your feedback. Uh, so it's kind of interesting because beans are not a cold season plant; they're a warm season annual. But when we have those freakish temperature swings or even humidity can cause problems too. Um, they start to have some issues, and they're most vulnerable when they go into their reproduction phase. So when they start to flower and fruits, and specifically I'm talking about pollen. So even if the weather is doing okay or the weather uh, is conducive, it's a favorable climate for a plant to reproduce. So I mean, flower, successful pollination, and then the fruit starts to grow. If we get to that part, the critical window where the biological clock is ticking, and we have, let's say, freak humidity swing or a freak temperature swing, or we have something crazy like dry hot to cool wet, or some variation of that, it can actually affect the pollination rate of that plant. So I'm saying this because last year I had a repeat issue of where this time of the year into July, everything looked hunky dory for those bean plants. But when I went out to check on my customer gardens, and I even had a couple customers ask me about it, uh, they had poor fruit set. So they did get successful beans, but it was probably 50% of what they had the year before. And if you get a 50% drop in production, that's noticeable, and then I typically hear about it. Uh, so anyway, I was trying to figure out what was going on, and this is another reason why I do successions. So if the first round of beans or the first round of peas struggles because of environmental conditions, I got another one coming in behind it. I do the same thing with the beans. And I was looking for another variety that is more tolerant of uh, warmer weather, maybe drier, but something that is more vigorous that is going to be less likely or less fussy like some of the bean varieties I've done in the past. And AI led me to Tobago. So I got that from Johnny Selected Seed. And so far, just from the germination rate, they are very vigorous growers. I actually transplanted around here this past week too, and with the temperature swings, they did fine. So far they're looking really promising. And I don't want to put the cart before the horse yet because we're not to that critical stage where they have to go through pollination. But if the pollination or that part of its life cycle is like I've seen so far with the germination rate and the seedling growth, then yeah, they should be a workhorse. So I'll be uh, I'll be sharing that with you when we get to that point. Okay, so I had mentioned a lot of sugar snap peas. They'd already produced pods. Um, But you can tell when a sugar snap pea plant is done because after it successfully reproduces, you'll start to see the plant yellow, and this is true for a lot of annuals. You'll start to see some yellowing, and that's not wrong. It's just the plant has a planned senescence. So that's a fancy word learned in horticulture, and then that was the first time I heard that was senescence. I didn't understand what that was, but that's just basically the plant's general life cycle at the end of its life. It's already completed its mission, and that's to produce the next generation of its own. So after it successfully does that, or it thinks it does that, then it'll senesce it, or the plant will die off, and then that's the circle of life for that plant. So this past week, uh, the pea pods were looking rough, and by rough I mean there's a window of time to pick sugar snap peas at their premium or where they're at their best. If you keep on going too long, the outside of those pods will start to get harder. And if you wait too long and the plant starts to senesce, uh, there's a dry down. So if you want to save seeds from sugar snap pea, you can continue to let it go and it'll dry out and then you can harvest the peas after that. I do that with my bean plants. I'll just let them do their thing until they're dried out and then I harvest them. Um, but I had dozens of sugar snap pea bags that were just telling me that we're done. We're not we're not doing this Minnesota thing anymore. So those other bean varieties that I had mentioned, those went right into the bags. And if I haven't mentioned this, I do the beans same with the peas where I start them indoors to germinate them. It's just something I do personally because it saves me time and I don't have to replant. So if I see 100% that that seed has germinated and has its cotyledons already out saying hi, then I'm transplanting that rather than direct seeding a grow bag and then having to come back and put more seeds in because I had a failure. I've also had problems in the past where mice would come in and dig up the seeds and then I'd find out that the plants were gone. Or the seeds were stolen. So that's another reason too that I start them inside and then I transplant them, and I do that with all the big seeds. So sweet corn this year I'm doing dent corn, start those indoors, and I don't know. It's a personal preference. There's a reason behind it. So so sugar snap peas went to beans. And then this past week, it was a lot of monitoring for temperature related injuries. So on young seedlings that aren't, they might be hardened off to where they can deal with the sun. But if we have those temperature swings, the seedlings are going to be less resistant than older plants. So I was monitoring for the leaf canopy on like tomatoes and I was asking, or stuff I was looking for are on the youngest leaves at the top of the plant or at the end of the growing shoot. I'm looking to see if any of those leaves are burned, and if they are, then that's telling me that plant's it's not doing well. It's either getting cooked from the temperature and or the sunlight. But since I put the sunshade up last week, that that's actually noticeable inside the hoop house of knocking down the power of the sun. I was also looking for uh, pests. So I had a squash plant that had a little hole. It looked like something chewed on it, but it's really small. And that was odd too because my number one tool for all my plants is I use row covers. And something like this. I think yeah, it's kind of blowing. You can see it. So I use row covers all the time, everywhere that I can. Um, and I've mentioned this before. It's a mechanical barrier, and it's supposed to keep pests off typically, but some pests are pretty persistent, and they'll figure a way how to get underneath that. Or sometimes I accidentally bring the pest in. I have had that before where brought a plant, put it under the row cover, and then found out later that I accidentally brought a unwanted house guest into the wherever that location was. So anyway, I saw a little hole in the leaf, and I saw a little baby grasshopper about that big. So that was that guy that I found. This year too, and I don't know if it's because of the sudden increase in temperature, I've noticed there's a lot less pressure on cabbage moths. I haven't seen many flying around. I haven't had as many issues as I have in the past. Um, so That's something too that I've just noticed over years of growing is that temperature climate that negatively or positively affects certain pests. The other one too, like I mentioned, that grasshopper is if we have a very warm, dry summer, that's going to be a bigger problem. That's where I've seen those guys reproduce very quickly when the hotter and drier the weather is. So then I was also looking for any type of disease issues, and this is the time where I start looking for problems. I had some issues earlier in the spring with the rhubarb and strawberries. There's a fungi here in Minnesota. It looks like a little spot. I had that on the rhubarb and strawberries. But honestly, when we got very hot, which was a blessing for that fungi, is that spread all stopped. So I haven't really seen any issues with that here recently. Something else I look for too with the temperature increases is sunburn. I do have some sunburn on some of my cool season plants, but it's not horrible. It's just to be expected, honestly. But I had some lettuce, some kale. All the broccoli is looking really well, so that's fantastic. And then I have some cabbage plants that have some singeing. I'll show you here shortly. But that's all stuff I look at this time of the year. Um, some known issues that I have as we go further through the summer is I have powdery mildew every year, and I'm going to show you strategies I use for that. But as we get further into the growing season, I can guarantee you that's going to show its ugly face, and it's ugly. It does look kind of cool at first, but if you let powdery mildew go too far, it wreaks havoc. So I have lots of cucumber, squash, and pumpkins, and those are its favorite host plants. So yeah, it's a real problem. See, Jason, I'm about to put up some small hoop mesh for my brassicas. Fantastic. Rust and powdery mildew are common plant issues. Yep, yep. And there are, since we're out in the acreage, out in the country, a rural spot, there are some pests that I have that my customers that live in the city or in town don't have. Yeah, so how do I counteract powdery mildew? So I've had I this year I'm probably gonna just be hitting with copper fungicide, honestly. In the past I've tried using some home remedies, popular ones that you see online. I don't I haven't had very good luck with those. Um, so I use copper fungicide when I need to. I actually did use that earlier this year on the rhubarb and strawberries. That was another reason why I was able to slow it down. I have higher standards on my plants that I have to keep because I'm a certified nursery, so I get inspected every year. Um, so stuff like that, I can't let it get out of control because then it affects my ability as a commercial grower to stay certified or be able to sell plants. I mean, if my plants are diseased, then I can't sell them. So I have different rules that I have to play by than a home gardener as a commercial certified nursery. But copper fungicide is that's a common fungicide to use on a lot of fungal issues with plants. So anyway, I've talked enough. Let's look at some plants. Yep, you got it. Okay, I did I did test it again before today, and my camera on my phone is working. So let's go right to that. And we'll start with these ones. These are my new addition I picked up this week. And let's start with this first one. This is lemon thyme. This is the last one they had there too at the big plant nursery. So this one's coming into my collection. This one's gonna be great for my senior living communities where I do the programs. Anything like this that has a really strong scent to it, or it's just a very cool plant, or something that a lot of folks haven't seen before, like this lemon thyme. That's stuff I go after. Uh, for the novelty, for the sensory interaction, it's just a very cool plant to add to this. So, and it's also another perennial, so I'm gonna be propagating that and then growing out. This one, I'm sure you probably recognize, but if you don't, this is lemon balm, and this one's very cool. So, I'd say out of the two, lemon balm has the strongest fragrance, and then that lemon thyme it does have a very good fragrance. It's just not quite as strong as the lemon balm. So there's those, and then I got spearmint. So another mint. I think this is mint number 5 in my inventory. So that's gonna be getting propagated, and then I got some chives. So those are the new plants to the MEG nursery for this week. And yeah, as we keep going, I'm just gonna keep on adding to the inventory. And I think the next mint that I want to get, I already checked it out, is gonna be orange mint or citrus mint. But here are a couple cabbage plants I want to share with you, and you can tell which one was happy this last week and which one was not. So these are both pixie. It's a compact variety, head cabbage. But just looking at the difference between these, you see the difference in the color of the leaves, and then you can see they're both starting to form heads. But if we look up really close on this one, this right here, where I was talking about leaves getting singed, this is from this plant getting overheated. And you see this one, this one looks fantastic. This is how I want to see this. And if we peek down the middle, you can see it's starting to form its head. So this plant's going to be done here in a couple weeks. And especially since the temperatures are going to be in the 70s this week, or at least that's what the forecast is. It's always subject to change, but um, this one should be looking fantastic by the time it's done. Um, but this right here, and the only difference between these two is that this one and its buddies I pulled out of the hoop house. So they were over on the east side of the property. They get sun in the morning, and then they would get shade from about 1 o'clock on. So that's how I was able to manipulate these, or that was a lever I had, is I gave them afternoon shade. These guys do have shade because I have a shade cloth on that hoop house, but I can guarantee there's about a 10-degree difference in the environment that these were both growing in. Um, but if you're in containers, that's a lever that you have that you can pull, is if your cool season plant's overheating, just move it to a shady spot. At the very least, the afternoon shade is going to be huge. So, pixie cabbage. And then this one too, I wanted to give you an update. This one, I think I talked about this before, but this is called On Deck Sweet Corn. It's a hybrid. Did I print that on here? Yep. On Deck Sweet Corn hybrid. And this is what it looks like so far. So they recommend, I think it was 9 seeds per 24-inch container. And this container is half that size, so I've been doing 4. That's what I did last year, and it worked really well. But these are dwarf sweet corn plants, and they're only going to get to about 3.5, 4 feet tall max. And they did really well last year, so I'm doing them again. The kids like these. It's great program material for kids. So um, yeah. And something else probably end up talking about here later this year is you saw the difference between the those um, those cabbage plants and then that corn that's out in the hoop house. So it was getting that full 90-degree days. And I'll just mention this briefly, but I want to talk about this later this year on the difference between the maize plant or corn and other plants like even tomatoes, peppers, the cabbage definitely, or any of the herbs I showed you. I was trying to think about how I could talk about this or relate it, and since I'm a former car guy, or at least that's what I did for a living years ago, uh, the cabbage plants and tomatoes and those ones, they're completely different. They have a completely different engine than a maize plant or corn. So I'm gonna throw out some terms you may or may not have heard before, and we're gonna talk about it more. It's way too in depth to talk about right now, but I'm gonna throw out some terms just for you to think about. You can Google this too. C3 and C4. So C3 plants, those are like those tomatoes, peppers, cabbage. Most of the garden plants that we grow are going to be C3 plants. C4 plants, that's that maize plant, that corn plant. I'm only bringing this up because as we get into the summer months and you wonder why your corn is looking fantastic and no matter how hot it gets, keeps on chugging along, there's a reason. It's got a completely different engine for photosynthesis than all those other plants that you have. And we'll talk about this more later as the season goes on because this was something when I found out it's completely fascinating. It made a lot of sense after I started to realize like how it actually works, the biomechanical part of it. Um, but maize plants are not the same as any other garden vegetable or fruiting plant that you have. It's like having like a Porsche engine uh, or a hot rod engine. It is by its very nature and design, it works with heat. Whereas something like that cabbage plant is gonna just throw up the white flag, or the sugar snap peas just throw up the white flag of surrender and say, oh, "I'm out of here." Um, but it's very fascinating. So, yep. Jay found it. C3 plants are the most common type of plant. Yep. It's way too much to talk about right now, but it directly relates to photosynthesis and how that whole engine. I'm calling it the engine because that's how I make sense of it in my brain, but it's a completely different system and how it works. Shawnee said she ate her first piece. Congratulations. I don't know, Shawnee. I don't know if you were here at the beginning of this show, but I was talking about how I have one round of sugar snap peas left. Most of them this week threw up the white flag of surrender, so they're done. I pulled those plants out and they got replaced with bean varieties. But anyway, so I guess if you forget everything else I say, that's okay. Just remember that if you are in containers, or even if you're not in containers, there are levers that you can pull to help your plants out. So when we get super hot or we have drastic changes in temperature, just simply moving a plant, if you can, in a container, moving it to a area where it's going to get afternoon shade is going to be massive. And you saw the difference in those two cabbage plants, one that got afternoon shade and one that had no shade except for the 30% that I put over it. Um, but anyway, thank you very much for spending your time with me this morning, and look forward to talking more about plants and C3 and C4 plants this summer. And we're getting into the fun season, in my opinion, because this is where we get to start eating a lot of what we grow. So that's why we do it. And I look forward to hearing about your gardens too. So anyway, have a great week. If you're in Minnesota, we get a little bit of break from the heat this week, so that's nice. But I'll see you later.